Hey everyone. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you think about the characters and their choices. Enjoy the story. It started so innocently. Well, at least that's how I convinced myself. It's hard to even remember when everything shifted. I used to feel like I had the perfect life. I had everything. A beautiful home, a good job, and a husband who, while not always physically present, was successful and took care of me in every way possible. But, let's be honest. Sometimes, that kind of life can get dull. You start to wonder if there's more, or if you're just stuck in a loop of routine. And that's exactly how I felt for a long time. James, my husband, was a workaholic. He always had something to do, meetings, calls, projects. I got it, I really did. He loved his job, and he provided us with everything we could want. But after a while, I started to feel like I was just there. His focus was on his career, and I was left with a house that felt a little too big and empty. It's funny how quickly loneliness can creep in, even when you're surrounded by the things you thought would make you happy. One evening, we attended a company event. James had a presentation, and I tagged along. I didn't mind, but I could tell he was stressed, preoccupied. So, as he disappeared into his group of colleagues, I wandered around the venue, trying to make conversation with a few people I knew. That's when I met Rick. Rick was in his early 40s, a sharp dresser, and more confident than most people I'd met. He was James's boss, and I knew that because everyone around him treated him with a kind of reverence. At first, we exchanged pleasantries, but he was different. He paid attention. He asked about me, about my day, about what I thought of the company. He made me feel seen. That's something I hadn't felt in a while. James is lucky to have someone as supportive as you, he said, his voice warm but casual. It was nothing out of the ordinary, just a compliment, but there was something about the way he said it that made me feel important. I brushed it off, laughing awkwardly. Well, someone has to keep him in line, I replied, glancing over at James, who was still deep in conversation. Rick smiled and leaned in a little closer. Does he ever really see you? I mean, with everything you do for him? Rick asked, his gaze holding mine. There was something so direct about it. Like he wasn't just talking about the work-life balance. He was talking about me, about how I felt. I didn't know how to answer. Of course, I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him that James did see me. But I didn't feel like he did. Not in the way Rick was asking. And I think that's when the seed was planted. The conversation shifted, and we talked about casual things, work, life, nothing too serious. But somehow, I found myself looking forward to the moments when he'd come around at these events. He was always so easy to talk to. It was flattering, but I didn't want to think too much of it. Then, one evening, after an event where James had stayed late for some after-party work thing, Rick asked me to join him for dinner. I hesitated. I wasn't sure if I should. After all, I was married. But he wasn't asking for anything, right? Just dinner. Just two people talking. I told myself it was harmless. It's just dinner? I said to myself. It'll be fine? So, I agreed. We went to a nice restaurant, and as we sat across from each other, the conversation flowed easily. Rick was interesting, charming, and he seemed genuinely engaged in what I had to say. I felt something stirring inside me. It was a kind of excitement, a rush I hadn't felt in a long time. At some point, Rick reached across the table, his hand brushing mine in a way that wasn't accidental. I looked up, meeting his gaze. He didn't pull away. Instead, he gave me a slow, confident smile. "Lena," he said, his voice quieter now, more intimate. "You're a rare person. You deserve to be seen. To be appreciated." The words hit me in a way I didn't expect. It was like he'd said everything I was too scared to admit to myself. I hadn't felt truly appreciated in a long time, and for some reason, his words resonated with me deeply. We finished dinner, and he offered to walk me back to my car. The night felt like it could go on forever, but I was still torn. Was this wrong? I kept telling myself that it was just two people who found comfort in each other's company. I wasn't doing anything bad. As we reached my car, Rick turned to me. "You know, Lena, sometimes we need to step out of our routines," he said, his voice soft but insistent. "Sometimes, we need to break free to remember what we deserve." I didn't say anything, but in that moment, I felt like he understood. He understood what I needed, what I had been craving. The next words out of his mouth were the ones that broke the last of my hesitation. "Come with me. Let's go somewhere else. Let's just escape for a little while." I hesitated, unsure, but I didn't say no. Instead, I let him take the lead. We got into his car, and he drove us to a hotel on the outskirts of the city. The idea of escaping, even for just a night, was too tempting. I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't thinking at all. We got to the hotel, and I found myself standing in front of the door to his room. I still wasn't sure what I was doing, but I could feel the weight of everything pulling me forward. The excitement, the rush of doing something different. Something I thought I'd never do. It wasn't just about the hotel, or about Rick. It was about me, about feeling seen, about feeling wanted. I stepped inside. The rest of the night is a blur. But it wasn't until later, after everything was over, that the weight of what I had done began to sink in. I tried to tell myself that it was a mistake, a one-time thing. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just a mistake. I had crossed a line. And I would have to live with it. The next morning, I woke up in an unfamiliar bed, the light streaming through the blinds casting long shadows across the room. My head was heavy, my heart racing with a mix of excitement and guilt. I hadn't planned this. I hadn't even really thought about it beyond the moment. But now, as I sat there, staring at the ceiling, the reality of what had happened hit me harder than I expected. Rick was still asleep next to me, his breathing steady and calm. I couldn't say I regretted it, but the weight of the situation was starting to settle in. My first thought was, what have I done? My second thought was, what now? I tried to shake it off as best I could, convincing myself that it was just one night. I mean, things with James hadn't been great for a while, right? He was always so busy, always so distant. And me. Well, I was left alone in a house that felt more like a prison than a home. I told myself I deserved this. I told myself that this was my chance to feel alive again. To feel seen, like Rick had said. The guilt was there, but it was overshadowed by the thrill. Rick stirred next to me, his eyes flickering open, and he flashed that signature smile of his. "Good morning," he said, his voice still rough from sleep but with a warmth that made my stomach flutter. "How are you feeling?" I didn't know how to answer. Part of me wanted to be honest, to admit that I wasn't sure how I felt, that I was scared of what this meant. But instead, I smiled back. "I'm okay," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just trying to process everything, I guess." He chuckled, his hand reaching out to brush a strand of hair from my face. "It's all right, it's normal. You're not the first person to step out of their routine. I get it." I couldn't tell if he was reassuring me or himself, but I didn't push it. I didn't want to overthink it. Not yet. We spent the next few hours talking, getting breakfast, and just enjoying each other's company. But even as we laughed, there was a part of me that was pulling away, that was trying to make sense of everything. I couldn't ignore the voice in the back of my head telling me that I was making a huge mistake. But at the same time, I couldn't deny that being with Rick felt like the first time in months that I'd felt truly alive. By the time we left the hotel, I knew I had to face reality. But I didn't want to. I didn't want to go back to the house, to face James, and all the things I hadn't been willing to confront until now. So, I told myself I'd keep it to myself for just a little longer. It wasn't a big deal, right? It was just a night. It wasn't like I was falling in love with Rick. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. When I got home, James was already there. His jacket was thrown across the back of a chair, and he was in the middle of a conference call, looking more tired than usual. I paused at the door, watching him, wondering if he could sense something was different. Could he tell? Could he feel that something had shifted between us? He finished his call and glanced over at me. "Hey, babe, how was your night?" His voice was casual, but there was a certain detachment in his tone that I noticed immediately. "Good," I said, too quickly. "Just the usual. How about you?" I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "Busy," he replied, rubbing his eyes. "You know, same old stuff. It feels like I'm constantly running around lately." I nodded, forcing a smile, even though I could feel the guilt creeping up in my throat. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to say something. To confess. But I couldn't. I couldn't find the words. The thought of him finding out, of seeing the hurt on his face, paralyzed me. And so, I kept quiet. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. I'd see Rick at work, and each time, it felt like we were in our own little world, sharing glances and conversations that no one else could understand. He would send me little messages, checking in on me, making me feel like I was the only person who mattered in that moment. And I didn't want to stop. I didn't want it to end. But at the same time, there was this constant nagging feeling in my chest, a reminder that what I was doing wasn't just a harmless distraction. It was real. And I was betraying the man who loved me. James noticed the change, I think. He started asking more questions. He'd call me during the day, asking if I was okay. But it wasn't the same. He wasn't asking because he cared about how I was feeling. He was asking because he could sense something was off. One evening, a week after that night with Rick, James came home earlier than usual. I wasn't expecting it, and I could tell something was different in the way he looked at me. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. "You seem off." I froze, my stomach sinking. Was he starting to figure it out? Yeah. I lied? Just tired, I guess. He didn't look convinced, but he didn't press it. Instead, he sat down beside me on the couch, his eyes scanning my face as if trying to read me. "You know, Lena," he said slowly, "I've been thinking a lot lately. About us. About what's been going on." I felt a rush of panic flood through me. My mind raced, but I tried to keep my expression neutral. "What do you mean?" James took a deep breath and looked at me with a sincerity I hadn't seen in a long time. "I know things haven't been great between us. And I know I've been working a lot. But I want to fix this. I want to make things right. You deserve more than this distance between us." I stared at him, the weight of his words hitting me hard. My first instinct was to pull away to hide, but I couldn't. I knew he was trying. He always tried, but I didn't feel like I could give him the same in return anymore. "I'm sorry, James," I whispered, barely able to speak the words, "but I don't think it's enough anymore." He looked at me, his expression falling. "What do you mean?" I opened my mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. Instead, I turned away, feeling like I was about to drown in my own guilt. And in that moment, I realized I was no longer just dealing with the consequences of one night with Rick. I was facing the reality of my marriage, of everything I had been ignoring for so long. And I didn't know what to do next. The silence between us stretched on, thick and suffocating. I could feel the weight of James's gaze on me, his eyes searching for answers that I wasn't ready to give. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, each thud a reminder of the truth I was so desperately trying to avoid. He didn't push me to speak. Instead, he just sat there, waiting. I could tell he was hurt. He didn't need to say it. His face said everything. And that's when I knew everything was about to change. I don't know what to say," I whispered, looking down at my hands. I was still wearing the same clothes I'd had on that morning, the same ones I wore when I left the hotel with Rick. I couldn't get rid of the smell of him, the remnants of that night still lingering in my hair and on my skin. It was like a stain I couldn't wash off, no matter how hard I tried. James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't understand, Lena. What happened? You've been distant for weeks. And now you're telling me it's not enough." His voice cracked, and I could see the frustration building in him, his patience thinning. I opened my mouth to explain, but I couldn't find the words. There was too much to say, too many things I didn't want to face, and as much as I wanted to keep pretending that everything was okay, I knew I couldn't anymore. The truth was already hanging in the air between us, suffocating us both. "I'm sorry," I finally said, my voice breaking. "I don't know how to explain this. I've been so lonely, James, so alone. You were always working, always somewhere else. And I didn't know how to deal with it anymore. I trailed off, not knowing how to finish the sentence." James's eyes softened, but there was still a deep hurt there, one that I couldn't ignore. "So, you think this was the answer?" he asked quietly, pain evident in his voice. "You think going behind my back and betraying me is how you deal with being lonely?" His words stung, harder than I expected. I felt like I was being torn apart from the inside. This wasn't how I wanted it to go. I didn't want to hurt him, but I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. "I didn't plan for it to happen," I said, my voice trembling. It just happened. I never meant to hurt you, but I don't know how else to explain it. I was just lost. And Rick made me feel seen, James. He made me feel important again, like I mattered." The words left my mouth before I could stop them, and as soon as I said them, I realized how selfish I sounded. I hated myself for it. But there it was. The truth. "Rick?" James repeated the name, his voice flat. "The guy who works with me, right?" I nodded, barely able to meet his eyes. "Yes, he's been attentive. And I don't know. It felt like for the first time in a long time, someone was paying attention to me. He made me feel special, James. Something I haven't felt in forever. That's it. That's all it takes." James's voice was rising now, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You think I don't try? You think I don't care. You think this job, this life I've built, hasn't been for us. For you. I swallowed hard, trying to control the lump in my throat. I wanted to explain, to make him understand, but there was no way to make it sound less terrible. The truth was, I had let myself slip, and now I was facing the consequences. I know you work hard. I know you do all this for us, I said quietly, tears starting to form in my eyes. But I felt invisible. I felt like I didn't matter anymore. I needed someone to see me, James. I needed someone to make me feel alive. James looked at me, his face a mixture of disbelief and anger. And Rick was the answer. I nodded, unable to find the words to explain that it wasn't just about Rick. It was about me, and everything I had been ignoring in myself. I had been so caught up in the loneliness, in the need to feel wanted, that I had made the worst decision of my life. I didn't want this to happen. I didn't want to hurt you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But I'm sorry, James. I don't know what else to say. For a moment, there was only silence between us. James stood up, pacing back and forth, his hands running through his hair. I could see how torn he was. He didn't know what to do. And honestly, neither did I. Finally, he stopped, his eyes locking onto mine. So, what now, Lena? What the hell do I do with this? What do we do now? I had no answer. I couldn't give him an answer. I didn't know if there was a way back from this. I don't know. I whispered, feeling completely broken. I don't know what to do. I'm so sorry. James shook his head, his eyes full of frustration and hurt. You've betrayed me. You've betrayed us? His voice cracked, and I could see the pain in his face. I don't know if I can forgive you for this. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was like he was confirming all my worst fears. The truth was out now, and it was too late to take it back. I had destroyed everything. I understand, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. James stood there for a long time, his back to me. I could hear him breathing heavily, and it felt like the whole room was closing in on me. He was hurting, and I was the one who had caused it. Maybe we need some time apart, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I need to think about this. I need to figure out what I'm supposed to do. I nodded, knowing that he was right. There was nothing else to say. As he walked away, leaving me in the quiet of the room, I felt a cold emptiness settle in. I had lost him, and I didn't know how to fix it. The weight of what I had done was crushing me, and all I could do was sit there, alone with my guilt. And I realized too late that I had never truly understood what I had until it was gone. The following days were a whirlwind of confusion and regret. I barely saw James after our conversation. He kept to himself, his silence more deafening than anything he could have said. I had expected anger, maybe even some shouting, but instead, he withdrew completely. It was like he was slowly slipping away, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. Every time I tried to approach him, he brushed me off. His responses were short, and the distance between us felt like a physical barrier I couldn't break down. I tried to tell myself that we were just going through a rough patch, that things would get better, but deep down, I knew better. I knew that I had shattered something beyond repair. A week passed in a haze of uncertainty. I had expected him to confront me again, to demand answers, to yell at me, but instead, he was distant, almost cold. It was like I had ceased to exist in his world. Then one evening, as I was sitting in the living room, James walked in with a suitcase by his side. He was dressed in a way I'd never seen him before, crisp, well-tailored, like he was preparing for a new chapter in his life. "Where are you going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel my stomach tightening with anxiety. "I'm leaving," he said, his tone flat. "I need some time to figure things out." I felt a sudden lump in my throat. I had expected something like this, but hearing it out loud still hit me like a punch in the chest. "James, please," I started, but he held up his hand, stopping me mid-sentence. "Don't," he said. "You've made your choices. I've made mine." I opened my mouth to say something, but the words wouldn't come. I watched as he grabbed the suitcase and walked toward the door. "I'm sorry," I whispered, but he didn't turn back. He was gone. Just like that. For the next few days, I tried to reach him, but he didn't answer my calls. He didn't respond to my messages. I had no idea where he was or what he was doing. I was left in our empty house, overwhelmed by the mess I had created. I kept telling myself that maybe he just needed space, that everything would be okay once he had time to cool off. But then, a few days later, I received an email. The subject line simply read, "You should know." My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, wondering if this was finally him, finally telling me what he was thinking, or maybe forgiving me. But instead, the email contained something that knocked the air out of my lungs. It was a picture of a beautiful mansion in a foreign country. It was enormous, stunning, with marble floors, large windows, and lush gardens surrounding it. And beneath the picture, in bold text, was a simple message. I've already bought this. I'll be moving there soon. It's my new home. I don't think we're going to be able to work this out. This is my escape. I've made a life for myself without you. The message hit me like a ton of bricks. My mind raced as I tried to process what I was reading. He was leaving for good. And not just that, he had already planned his escape. He had bought a house. I felt a knot form in my stomach, the weight of my betrayal finally hitting me in full force. I wasn't just losing James. He was moving on, and I wasn't going to be a part of that new life. But there was more to the email. It wasn't just about his personal life. James had also attached a screenshot of a cryptocurrency portfolio. It was clear that he had been silently investing in crypto over the past few years, and from the looks of it, he had made a significant profit. Millions, maybe tens of millions of dollars. In that moment, I realized how much I had underestimated him. All these years, I had thought he was just working hard for us, never realizing that he was quietly building his own financial future. One that didn't include me. The email ended with one final line. I hope you find what you're looking for, Lena. But I don't think it'll be with me. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling numb. He was done with me. There was no going back now. I had destroyed everything. But the worst part, I hadn't even realized how much he had been hurting, how much he had been bottling up, until it was too late. A few days later, I received a call from one of my colleagues. The tone in their voice immediately set off alarm bells. Lena, there's something you need to know, they said, sounding uncomfortable. It's about Rick. It seems like he's been let go? What? I asked, confused. What do you mean? They're saying it's because of some personal conduct issues. Something happened with you, and it came to light. The higher-ups are not happy. My stomach dropped. I had no idea what they were talking about. Rick? Fired? For what? What does this have to do with me? Well, it seems like James has been quietly pulling strings behind the scenes. He's making sure Rick gets ousted from the company, and it looks like he's using his position to get it done. My colleague's voice was low, cautious. They're saying it's personal. No one knows all the details, but there are rumors flying around. I felt my face go pale. This was bad, really bad. James, I realized, wasn't just leaving me behind. He was taking action. He was making sure Rick paid for his role in everything that had happened. In a way, James had already started to get his revenge, and I couldn't blame him. I had destroyed his trust, and now he was making sure that Rick would pay the price too. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me felt relief. It was over. The connection with Rick was severed. But another part of me felt disgusted. James was getting his revenge in the only way he knew how. He was showing me that he had control, that he could walk away and rebuild while I was left in the ashes of my own mistakes. I sat there for hours, trying to figure out what I should do, what I could do. The damage was done. James had taken his escape, and now he was punishing both Rick and me in the only way that made sense to him. And I was left with nothing. No home. No relationship. No way of undoing the pain I had caused. The truth was, I had lost everything. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep everything under control. But in the end, I was the one who was left with nothing but my regrets. As I sat there in our empty house, I realized something that hit me harder than anything else. I wasn't the victim in this story. I was the cause of all of it. And now, it was time to face the consequences.